So I want to do a quick recap of Donnie Nietes, former WBO Strawweight and WBO Light Flyweight champion, who made his debut yesterday at Flyweight at 112 pounds to fight against Edgar Sosa, former Light Flyweight champion. And of course, a lot of people may remember him from being the pro debut for Roman Gonzalez on HBO last year. Although it must be said that Edgar Sosa is definitely well past his prime, for a number of reasons that I'll get to in a moment. Donnie Nietes did look really good in the fight. He was able to pretty much dominate the fight from bell to bell. I would have given Sosa a couple of rounds there, but all three judges had Nietes with a clean sweep, 120 to 108. And I mean, I can't necessarily argue too hard against it. Albeit I did think that there were a lot of spots where he just let let a lot of openings go. And I mean, that's kind of a common theme for Nietes, I think, just in general. He's a really solid boxer, good solid technical skills. He kind of reminds me of like a mixture of like the way Gonzalez kind of moves his torso a little bit, but more so in kind of a Carl Froch like stance, where he's got kind of a wide stance. He prefers to fight a little bit more at mid range as opposed to really inside pressuring you. And he's a guy that he's looking to really like kind of get maximum leverage at mid range. That's why he has that wide stance, kind of has his knees bent, is looking to throw with maximum power on each shot. Not so much combinations, but he'll throw a little bit of combos in there, maybe 2-3 punch combos, but not necessarily the endless streams of combos as the man that he is, of course, kind of chasing after in Roman Gonzalez. Of course, they were also chasing after Juan Francisco Estrada, trying to get a fight with him at flyweight. It wasn't able to come off, and incidentally, now Estrada has vacated both his WBO and his WBA titles in order to move up to super flyweight in a couple of weeks, where he's going to be making his super flyweight debut. Nietes, of course, just made his flyweight debut, and incidentally, he's now the basically the number one contender for whoever happens to win between Zhou Shiming and what was the guy's name? Kwan Pitsit Wonsunchai Jim, aka what was it? Patumsik Papuam, and they're going to be fighting on the Manny Pacquiao versus Jesse Vargas undercard. So the winner of that will be the WBO champion. I'm sure Zhou Shiming is going to wind up winning that, as he did their first fight. And then eventually Zhou Shiming versus Donnie Nietes probably going to be the fight that'll be made sometime early next year. That'll be a pretty legit interesting fight. In spite of the fact that Zhou Shiming isn't necessarily as highly thought of as a lot of people think. I mean, the thing is, his only loss was to On That Wrong, of course. Proved to be a pretty difficult fighter to beat, regardless of how good you were. He managed to defeat Kazuto Yoka, he managed to defeat Jonriel Casimero, however controversial, as well as McWilliams Arroyo, however controversial, before finally getting KO'd by Casimero in their rematch. But, definitely a difficult fighter. Overall, Zhou has still, managed to beat everybody else fairly handily. Donnie Nietes managed to defeat Edgar Sosa fairly handily. But, I mean, like I said, Sosa came into this fight 3.5 pounds overweight. He's an older fighter, not in the greatest of shape. And he's a guy that, in spite of the fact that he was, years back, he was the man, he was the premier fighter at the lower weight classes, flyweight and below, at 108 pounds in particular. As a WBC light flyweight champion, especially after his big upset of Brian Valoria back in Valoria's prime, as he was trying to make his way towards HBO stardom. His eventual loss, I think it was in his 10th or 11th title defense against Rodel Mayol, really did something bad to him. He wound up getting hit with a head clash by Mayol that wound up fracturing like a couple of bones in his face and gave him like a bad concussion. He wound up getting knocked down in that fight shortly after the head clash, obviously. And he just never seemed to really be the same after that. He's always seemed like real gun shy, and just I don't know. It hasn't looked like the same fighter in any sense of the word, whether it be like technique wise or stamina wise, and pretty much the whole nine. But I mean, be that as it may, he has managed to rack up a couple of solid wins since then, namely Giovanni Segura in particular, another fellow former champion. In spite of the fact that he did come up short against flyweight champions Akira Yagashi, as well as Pongsek Wanyangkam, who is a guy that was another one of the premier fighters at flyweight for the past decade or so. But here against Nietes, he was brought in essentially to, get Nietes' feet wet, get him warmed up to the possibility of fighting at flyweight against, a crafty veteran, a guy that could have potentially given him more trouble, but he wasn't quite able to really get into a solid rhythm in order to do so. So with this, of course, Nietes, as I mentioned before, he's the number one contender. If it's not going to be Zhou Shiming, I think fights with some of the other premier fighters at the weight class would be excellent. Kazuto Ioka's out there. Although Kazuto Ioka's most likely going to be having to fight the interim WBA champion, Stemp Kiatnawat, so that the WBA can basically have only one title at flyweight, just like they've been doing with a couple of the other weight classes that they've already done so far. Most recently, Shinsuke Yamanaka versus Anselmo Moreno. Janriel Casimero may be a tough one to try to get done because, it's doubtful that you would see two fighters from the Philippines fight against each other unless both of them had like all the belts. So Nietes versus Casimero probably won't be happening, along with the fact that both of their teams are trying to look towards, the likes of a Roman Gonzalez or Juan Francisco Estrada, or potentially a Naoya Inoue, going off into the future. Although Casimero may wind up vacating that IBF belt as well. He's another guy that finds it tough to make flyweight. He was barely able to make it against Amnat in their rematch, and he was able to make it for Charlie Edwards, but still, you could tell he's pretty tight at the weight. So we may see Nietes against possibly one of the other highly ranked contenders for the IBF. Or there's also for the WBC coming up later this year, possibly on New Year's. I've been hearing about Narupan Pochokchai, aka Narupan Kaikana, potentially fighting against Toshiyuki Igarashi in Japan for the vacant WBC title that Roman Gonzalez will have vacated by then. I don't think he's officially vacated yet, but the word is it's a matter of days. Chocolatito is going to vacate the WBC flyweight belt. And then they're gonna move on with Kaikana, or who knows, maybe make Gonzalez the champion emeritus or something. Should he ever decide to go back to flyweight, maybe he takes a loss at super flyweight sometime in the future and decides to go back down, or maybe he just decides to go back down. Figures it'd be better, kind of like Floyd Mayweather at 147 versus 154, for instance, or Pacquiao too. But yeah, Narupan Kaikana versus Toshiyuki Igarashi. Winner of that fight would be an excellent opponent for Nietes. The one critique that I've had of Nietes, in spite of the fact that he's looked good in most every fight that he's been in, except for maybe a couple like the Manuel Vargas fight and the first Moises Fuentes fight, is the fact that he's gotten a lot of accolades, but he hasn't necessarily gone out of his way to fight some of the other top level fighters, whether it be some of the other champions or some of the recent title contenders or former champions at whatever weight he happens to be at, whether it was 105 or 108. It was pretty much like he won the WBO title at both weights, and then he would just kind of fight the next guy in line. He'd fight the next mandatory, then the next mandatory, then the next mandatory. And I mean, in spite of that, he did manage to rack up a few good names on his resume. Ramon Garcia was a big one. Mario Rodriguez is a big one. Raul Garcia, the brother of Ramon, was a pretty solid one recently. Francisco Chihuas Rodriguez, probably the best name on his record, considering the fact that Chihuas was a unified strawweight champion. Him and Moises Fuentes probably about equal level to a certain degree in terms of their overall abilities in the ring and resume combined with that. Manuel Vargas, of course, was a pretty solid boxer, but didn't necessarily have all of the achievements. But he had the ability in comparison. But the thing is, it seems like a lot of people felt as though Nietes had nothing left to prove at 108. I, on the contrary, think that he could have very well fought some of the other top fighters. I don't think that it was an absolute victory that he would have defeated, for instance, Ryoichi Taguchi, the WBA light flyweight champion. As a matter of fact, I think I probably would have favored Taguchi if the two of them would have fought. I don't think it would have been a guaranteed victory should he have fought Ganigan Lopez or Pedro Guevara either. Two very, very tough fighters who are actually going to be rematching here in, I think, 2 or 3 weeks from now. But their first fight was a great fight before either of them wound up winning a title. And now Guevara won the first fight, but Lopez is now the champion. Funny enough, so he's actually going into the rematch as the A side, in spite of the fact that he lost their first fight. But I mean, either of those guys I would have considered very much live, very much a 50-50 versus Nietes, as well as Taguchi. And then, of course, there was Akira Higashi as well. You know, a guy that's been a proven commodity. You know, of course, he lost to the very best guys he fought, those being Chocolatito, Kazuto Ioka, and the aforementioned Pedro Guevara. But, you know, he would have been another solid guy addition. You know, probably, you know, the best guy potentially on Nietes' overall, you know, record, you know, along with the likes of Chihuahua Rodriguez and Moises Fuentes. But he has plenty of opportunity to make good on some of the promise that he's shown in the past, but hasn't necessarily, I don't want to say like hasn't lived up to, but like hasn't exceeded. He's kind of done, you know, the champion thing, like, okay, I won my belt, I'm defending my belt, and I'm just cool where I'm at. I'm not, you know, he wasn't really going off trying to really like stamp his name, conquer other weight classes, or excuse me, conquer other world championships, other guys' titles, say like, oh no, I'm the only champion in this division, and you know, that's all there is to it. I'm the man, period, point blank. He never really stamped his name down like that at either 105 and 108. And there were fights, but there were times before where he was offered fights with Roman Gonzalez and, you know, of course, Estrada more recently, and apparently, you know, they kind of rebuffed those offers. I think a lot of that has to do, however, with his promoter, Ala Villamor, Ala Edito Villamor, who himself was a great fighter, great strawweight fighter back in the day. Fought Ricardo Finito Lopez and also fought, oh man, I'm forgetting his name now. But he fought two great world champions at 105 pounds back in the 90s. He was a really solid fighter himself. And had Finito Lopez and Sorvorapin, Ratanapo Sorvorapin, not been as great of fighters as they were, you know, two of the all-time greats of that weight class, he probably would have become a world champion himself. You know, it's kind of unfortunate that he never quite got that opportunity. But, you know, being that he was a former fighter, I think he's really looking out for his clients. You know, everybody in all our promotions, whether it's Nietes, whether it's Mark Magsayo, whether it's Arthur Villanueva, the Pagara brothers. You know, he's definitely looking out for them, trying to maximize their ability to make money and become famous as well. You know, just trying to maximize their abilities overall. You know, not trying to cheap out on just their overall potential in order to get the prizes in the prize fighting game. But that's Donnie Nietes. He did a solid job there against Edgar Sosa. I'd be willing to bet that a Zoe Shamin clash after Zoe manages to take care of Papuem in their rematch will be likely for next year. And I think it'll probably say a little bit more things about Nietes, in spite of the fact that Zoe Shamin isn't necessarily the biggest flyweight on the planet either. You know, he's a tall guy, but he's a slender guy. You know, he's a guy that, all things considered, should probably be at 108 or 105 pounds himself. More so even than Nietes, really. Just if you look at the way they're built. But you know, Nietes definitely is very much a top 5 fighter at flyweight. I don't necessarily favor his chances going up against the bigger names at flyweight or super flyweight, but he has every opportunity to prove my assumptions wrong. And hopefully he makes good on them. You know, he's a little bit on the older side at 34, I believe. So, you know, he definitely has to try to get some things done before the clock starts ticking on him. But that's pretty much all I got to say about Donnie Nietes. Solid job for him. The dominant performance. And on to the next one, man. So, catch you guys on the next. Peace.